Tibajir wrote his resignation letter to the Kambonaba on a Tuesday morning, sitting at the small desk in his room off the teaching hall, using the formal military stationery he had carried since his first posting, because a soldier's habits outlive his commission even when the soldier himself has chosen to become something else. The letter was brief. Military writing demanded economy, and 12 years of service had burned the ornament out of his prose the way the encoding frequency had burned Mariama's cipher into his arms, permanently, structurally, leaving only what was necessary. To the Kambonaba, commander of the Ironhaven garrison, I hereby submit my formal resignation from military service, effective upon receipt. I have served 12 years under your command and under the commands that preceded yours. I have served with the competence my abilities allowed and the loyalty my character required. I am not resigning because I have found the service lacking. I am resigning because I have found a post that requires exactly what you said I was, someone who notices things and is not bright enough to be political about it. The first loom of the Fugu Weavers Guild requires an observer. The position is permanent. The work is tedious, detailed, and without glory. It is, in other words, perfectly suited to my talents. I am grateful for 12 years of training that prepared me for a career I could not have imagined. I remain available to the garrison as a civilian consultant should my particular skill set prove useful. With respect and without sentimentality, Tibajia. He folded the letter, sealed it with the plain wax he used for official correspondence, no signet, no emblem, the seal of a man who had never been important enough for personalized stationery. The wax smelled of beeswax and smoke, a small warmth in the morning cold. He set the letter on the desk and sat with it for a moment, his scarred forearms resting on the wood, the geometric lines of Mariama's cipher catching the dawn light through his small window. 12 years folded into an envelope. The weight of a career measured in wax and paper. He did not feel loss. He felt the specific, quiet satisfaction of a load redistributed, not lighter, not heavier, but better balanced. The soldier was becoming the observer. The observer had been the soldier all along. He delivered the letter to the guild's courier service and descended to the teaching hall. The hall was quiet. Students would arrive in an hour. The looms stood in their rows, draped in cloth covers, each one a node in the restored encoding network. The morning light came through the high windows at an angle that caught the dust motes, the building's eternal particulate, the textile dust of centuries suspended in shafts of gold. The smell was home now, lanolin, indigo, warm wood, the sweet copper undertone of encoding frequency at rest. He crossed the hall and descended to the first loom's chamber. Zueta was already there. She was not at the tapestry. She was in the side passage, the narrow corridor that led to Mariama's loom room. The room where the pattern keeper had worked, where the encoded smock had been woven, where the convergence shield had been designed and built by hands that were now dust and memory and geometric scars on a soldier's forearms. The door was open. Zueta stood in the threshold, not entering, her hand resting on the doorframe. Mariama's loom occupied the center of the small room, a traditional fugu loom, wooden, simple, unremarkable to any eye that could not see the encoding frequency woven into its construction. The shuttle sat in its rest position. It was cold. Tibajia could feel the absence of warmth from where he stood, the shuttle that had been the last object Mariama's living hands had touched, now carrying no heat, no residual frequency. Nothing but the cool weight of wood and iron that had served its purpose and been set down. The dust had settled. A fine layer of it covered the loom's crossbeams, the shuttle's handle, the stool where Mariama had sat. Nobody had entered this room since the alignment. The dust was undisturbed, a room frozen in the moment after its occupant left, the specific, terrible stillness of a workspace whose worker would not return. Zueta stood in the threshold and looked at the loom. She did not speak. She did not weep. She stood with the encoded smock draped over her shoulders, and her mother's legacy carried in 14 volumes and a curriculum and a fractured guild and a restored network, and the quiet, comprehensive grief of a daughter who had finished her mother's work and was now, for the first time since Mariama's death, standing in the place where the work had begun. Tibijia stood behind her and said nothing. The silence between them had its own grammar now. 3 months of shared purpose had taught it vocabulary, and this silence said, "I am here. You are not alone with this. Take the time you need." She took it. 3 minutes. 4. The amber light from the main chamber filtered down the corridor and touched the dust on the loom with gold. The shuttle sat in its rest. The stool waited for a body that would never sit in it again. WuDon lifted her hand from the doorframe. She turned. She did not close the door behind her. The door stayed open. The loom room breathed the chamber's amber air. Dust motes drifted in from the corridor, disturbing the settled layer, mixing the preserved stillness with the living atmosphere. The room was no longer sealed. It was part of the building again, part of the guild. Part of the ongoing, breathing, teaching, weaving life that Mariama had died to protect. Tibijia followed WuDon back to the main chamber. They did not discuss what had happened in the threshold. They did not need to. Some things are communicated in open doors and undisturbed dust, and the choice to leave a room accessible rather than preserved. The teaching day began. Students descended. Looms uncovered. Thread measured. The unified encoding curriculum moving through its 8th week, intermediate pattern integration, the techniques that allowed weavers to combine the guild's textile notation with other fragments encoding. Yakubu, the 17-year-old from Yendi, was already working at advanced levels, his cross-faction integrations, producing harmonics that made the older weavers shake their heads, with a mixture of admiration and unease. Routine, the beautiful, unglamorous routine of maintenance. The thing that came after the crisis and mattered more than the crisis ever would. The students left at sunset, the hall emptied, the building settled into its evening frequency. Tibijia descended to the first loom. And stopped. The tapestry had changed. Not the single blue thread he had noticed 2 weeks ago, that thread had continued its slow growth along the tapestry's outer edge, extending itself a few centimeters each day, patient and steady. He had filed daily observations. WuDon had documented the phenomenon in pattern keeper notation. They had transmitted the data through the custodian network. The blue thread was a known anomaly, cataloged and monitored. This was new. A section, not a thread, a section. A full band of material had appeared at the tapestry's outermost edge, beyond the blue thread, beyond the Guild Council's record, beyond everything the Zagale had ever encoded. The band was approximately 30 centimeters wide and ran the entire circumference of the tapestry. It had not been there at the morning's inspection. The material was the same woven light the rest of the tapestry used, the Zagale's standard archival medium, crystallized encoding frequency. But the content was wrong. The patterns were not in the Zagale's angular notation. They were not in the guild's textile encoding. They were not in any script that Tibijia, who could not read any of the tapestry's languages, could compare to anything he had seen before. The script was fluid. Curves and loops and spirals that moved across the light fabric the way water moves across stone, flowing, changing, cycling. Each character shifted as he watched. 7-second cycles, WuDon had measured during her preliminary analysis of the blue thread's growth patterns. The same periodicity, the same organic movement, but now applied to entire words, entire sentences, entire passages of text in a language that no one in the building had ever seen. The script was alive, the meaning was in the movement, and the script was warm. Heat rose from the new section in a gentle column that Tibijia could feel through the scarred skin of his palms, not the tapestry's ambient radiance, but a deeper heat, geological, rising from the foundation beneath the chamber floor. The same warmth he had felt from the blue thread. The same warmth that made the table in the teaching hall vibrate on the day of the first lesson. Something beneath, the system was riding in the system's memory.
WuDon.
He did not raise his voice. The chamber carried sound. She descended from the corridor where she had been completing her evening maintenance documentation. She saw the section. Her eyes went wide. She crouched before it, her hands hovering above the fluid script, reading the encoding frequency with the pattern keeper's trained perception. The concentration on her face was total, the expression of a linguist encountering a text in a language she had never studied, but could feel the structure of through the encoding medium she had spent her life learning to read.
The encoding frequency is the zagales,
She said slowly.
the carrier wave, the medium, but the language, the content being carried, is older, much older. The notation predates the zagales angular script. The encoding is using the system's infrastructure to deliver content the system's builders did not author.
Can you read it?
Partially, the encoding structure is familiar. It is using frequency modulation patterns I recognize from the foundational techniques in Mariama's first volume, the oldest techniques. The ones Mariama believed predated the pattern keepers themselves, if I read the encoding structure rather than the language.
She pressed her palms flat against the chamber floor. The stone was warm.
It is organized as a communication, not a record, not a history, a message, directed outward, addressed to whoever is maintaining the system.
Addressed to us.
Addressed to custodians, yes.
She was quiet for a long time, her palms on the warm stone, her eyes moving across the fluid script with the specific, intense focus of a person translating in real time between two languages that should not have been compatible.
The encoding structure carries emotional register. The zagales medium allows for it. The tapestry records not just information but intent, and the intent of this message is.
She paused, chose the word carefully.
Introduction.
The fluid script wrote one more line. The characters cycled through their 7-second variations. Curves becoming loops, becoming spirals, becoming curves. Each transformation carrying a datum, each datum part of a sentence, each sentence part of a message that was being written in real time by something beneath the system that was using the system's own memory to speak. Zuera translated the encoding structure. Not the language, she could not read the language, but the encoding's emotional register, the intent carried in the frequency modulation, the message beneath the message.
It is a greeting.
She said, her voice was quiet, not afraid, awed. The awe of a pattern keeper who had spent her life studying the system's language and was now hearing a voice older than the system itself, speaking through the system's medium, using the system's grammar to deliver a message in a vocabulary that predated everything she knew.
A greeting.
Tibajir repeated.
The encoding reads, introduction, identification, acknowledgement of maintenance, and.
She stopped. Read the final line's encoding structure 3 times.
The final clause translates as something like, hello, we have been here longer than you know.
The chamber was very quiet. The first loom hummed. The tapestry pulsed. The fluid script cycled through its living variations, the greeting written in a dead language that was not dead, that had been sleeping, waiting, and was now speaking, because for the first time in 1,000 years, the system above it was being maintained by people who could hear.
Case opened.
Tibajia said. His forearms itched. Mariama's cipher burned beneath his scarred skin with a heat that had nothing to do with the encoding frequency and everything to do with the foundation beneath the encoding frequency. The geological substrate, the deep warmth, the thing beneath the thing. The cipher responded to the greeting the way a tuning fork responds to a note it was designed to match. As if Mariama's encoding, the pattern keeper's 300-year-old custodial knowledge, had always contained the key to hearing this voice, had always been listening for it, had always known that beneath the system the pattern keepers maintained, something older was waiting to say hello. Zuera stood. She looked at him with the expression of a woman who had finished one investigation and found, at its end, the beginning of another.
Case opened.
She agreed. The fluid script continued to write. The greeting extended. The characters cycled. The warmth rose from below. The first loom recorded everything, the Zagale's medium capturing a message from something that predated the Zagale, the system's memory expanding to include a voice it had never been designed to hold but was holding anyway, because systems built for maintenance adapt to what needs maintaining. And what needed maintaining now was a conversation between the surface and the deep. Tibigia stood at the entrance. The soldier's posture, the observer's attention. His scarred forearms at his sides, Mariama's cipher pulsing with the warmth from below, the dead woman's message, and the ancient greeting resonating in the same flesh. The pattern was continuing. The pattern was speaking. And the pattern was saying something that no one in the territories, not the guild, not the Tindana, not the custodians, not the Zagale themselves, had ever heard before. "Hello, we have been here longer than you know." The investigation was beginning, the music was changing, new instruments were joining. And the soldier who noticed things stood guard at the entrance to a mystery that was older than the system he protected, deeper than the foundation he stood on, and patient enough to have waited 1,000 years for someone to listen. He was listening. The pattern continued.